The night had fallen heavy over the alpine village, a darkness so complete it seemed to swallow even the snow underfoot. The wind howled through the narrow streets like a chorus of lost souls, carrying the scent of frost and pine. Every house was quiet, every hearth dim, every child tucked under blankets, unaware that the night was not meant for sleep. Beyond the village, in the depths of the forest, the shadows moved with a life of their own. Something ancient and relentless stalked the land, a creature older than the mountains themselves, a devil wrapped in black fur with horns that scraped the clouds. It was Krampus, and the night was his domain. His eyes glowed like molten coals, watching, waiting, burning through the walls and doors, seeing every sin, every whisper of wrongdoing, every stolen toy, every lie, every moment of cruelty that children thought would go unnoticed. The chains on his wrists rattled in the cold, each link a reminder of the centuries he had walked these lands, punishing, warning, punishing again. His tongue, long and serpentine, flicked through the air, tasting the fear that clung to the air like frost on the windows. With every step, his hooves cracked the frozen earth, leaving footprints that would vanish with the morning snow, but lingered in memory, a promise of what was to come. The villagers knew the tales. Mothers would hush their children with whispered warnings, "Be good, or he will come." Fathers would shake their heads at the stories, but glance nervously toward the forests, where darkness twisted unnaturally, where the wind seemed to speak in voices not its own. Some claimed to have seen him once, a fleeting shadow on the rooftops, a pair of burning eyes staring through the night. They said he was patient and more terrifying than any human could imagine, because he did not forget. He waited, bided his time, and struck when his victims thought themselves safest. Krampus prowled the village streets like a predator. The snow muffled human sounds, but it carried the scent of sin, and that scent guided him more accurately than any map. One child had lied to his parents, another had stolen a trinket, another had been cruel to a friend, a pet, a sibling. Krampus did not judge lightly, and he did not forgive. Every misdeed, no matter how small, was recorded in the memory of the forest, etched into the ice, and now it called him forth. The wind rattled the chimneys as if warning the sleeping children, and then came the first soft scratch on the roof tiles, so subtle that it could be mistaken for nothing. But it was never nothing. It was him. His hooves clicked against the frozen shingles, a staccato rhythm that made the heart pound. The shadows danced unnaturally across the walls, stretching and twisting, echoing the movements of the forest beyond. Inside one house, a little girl turned in her sleep, sensing something watching. She could feel the cold pressing against her window, a darkness heavier than any ordinary night. The shadows inside her room began to stretch, crawling along the floor and walls. She whispered for her mother, but the voice seemed to vanish before it left her lips. Outside, Krampus's long tongue flicked once, twice, tasting the fear that rose from her chest. The chains rattled closer. The bell jingled a single note, low and metallic, vibrating through her bones, making her shiver. And then he was gone from sight, vanishing into the darkness, but never gone from the sense of being hunted. Across the village, the other children stirred, some in dreams, some awake with sudden terror. No home was safe. Krampus's shadow fell across every roof, his hooves tracing paths through the snow that only he could see, paths that led him to the guilty and the sinful. Some children were lucky, only glimpsing the red glow of his eyes through the window, or the shadow of his horns against the wall. Others were not so fortunate. The basket he carried could hold the smallest or the largest, the clever or the careless, all for the forest to claim. The birch rods lashed of their own accord, striking where the misdeeds were greatest, leaving marks that would fade from flesh, but never from memory. Krampus was relentless, slow, deliberate. Every step was meant to prolong terror, to stretch fear like a living thing across the hours. He prowled, circling, doubling back, returning to houses that seemed safe, whispering threats in a voice that no one could hear clearly. A hiss beneath the wind that made hearts race and stomachs tighten. His horns scraped the eaves of buildings, clanging softly, a sound like warning bells from the underworld. He was a creature of folklore and nightmare, every legend true, every tale a shadow of his reality. The children of the village, unaware in their sleep, had been chosen. Krampus selected patiently, favoring not always the worst, but the most unrepentant, the ones whose small sins compounded into a weight that could not be ignored. One boy had taken a friend's toy. One girl had hidden the truth from her parents. A small lie, a small cruelty, but enough to catch his attention. Krampus's glowing eyes pierced the darkness, finding these little hearts full of fear, full of unspent terror. And when he came, it was not a sudden attack, but a long, creeping suffocation of dread, a knowing that the shadows themselves were alive, that the air carried malice, that the forest itself conspired against them. Hours passed. The village remained asleep, but Krampus moved steadily through the snow, leaving footprints that vanished with the wind, but lingering in memory. The sound of chains rattling, soft and irregular, echoed through the alleys and over rooftops. Sometimes he paused, listening, tasting, sniffing. Sometimes he crept along the windows, a silhouette against the moonlight, horns curling like twisted roots, his tongue flicking like a predator testing the air. The children dreamt of darkness, of claws, of the eyes of a devil in the night, unaware that these dreams were not dreams, but memories forming of what was to come. As the night deepened, the terror grew. No one slept easily. Even adults felt a chill that could not be explained, a sensation that the forest itself had grown closer, that something watched from the shadows beyond the snow-draped trees. Krampus was patient. He did not need to strike immediately. Fear was the feast he lived on. He waited until the moment was perfect. Then his basket, chains, and rods became instruments of judgment. The slightest squeak, the faintest movement, a whispered prayer, could attract him closer. And when the sun rose, the village would appear peaceful once more. The snow glistened, children awoke to laughter and warmth, parents smiled, and yet the memory lingered. The scratch on the roof, the rattling of chains, the glimpse of red eyes in the night. Some children returned from Krampus's attentions with only a story to tell, a terror that would last for years. Others were never seen again, their absence a warning for all who came after. The forest retained its secret, the night its hunter, and Krampus remained eternal, watching, waiting, always hungry, always patient. No tale could fully capture him. No song, no warning, no parent's whisper could ever contain the darkness of Krampus. He was more than legend. He was a living shadow, a devil of the alpine winter, an embodiment of punishment and fear. He was the darkness behind the firelight, the cold under the blankets, the shadow in the corner of every child's eye. And he was coming again. He comes each year, patient, slow, relentless. Each winter the forests grow darker, the snow falls thicker, and the night stretches longer. Children shiver under blankets, parents glance nervously at the trees, and the village sleeps with one eye open, for Krampus is always hungry, always watching, and always patient. The night continues, the chains rattle, the bells jingle softly in the distance, the snow falls quietly, covering his tracks but never erasing the fear. The horns scrape the rooftops, the tongue flicks in the air, tasting the dread that lingers long after the creature is gone. Krampus is eternal, unyielding, unstoppable. And when the wind howls through the alpine forest tonight, remember, he is out there, waiting, watching, hungry. The night did not loosen its grip. If anything, it grew heavier. The snow continued to fall, soft and endless, layering silence upon silence. The village remained asleep, unaware that time itself had begun to bend. Minutes stretched into hours, hours dissolved into something shapeless and oppressive. This was no ordinary winter night. This was a night that belonged to Krampus, and he had only just begun. Beyond the last house, at the edge where lamplight died and the forest thickened into blackness, Krampus stood motionless. The trees loomed around him like silent witnesses, their branches bowed under frost as if in reverence. His breath rolled out in thick, steaming clouds, each exhale carrying the scent of iron, smoke, and ancient winters long forgotten. His eyes glowed steadily, unwavering, fixed on the village below. He listened. Every lie whispered earlier that day, every act of cruelty excused as a joke, every selfish thought buried and forgotten. He heard them all. The chains around his wrists tightened on their own, metal grinding against metal with a low, aching groan. Somewhere deep in the forest, something answered. A distant crack of wood, a howl cut short, a sound that suggested the wild itself feared what walked among it tonight. Krampus stepped forward. The forest parted without resistance. Snow did not crunch beneath his hooves. It yielded, as if afraid to announce his arrival. Shadows clung to him, stretching and warping with every movement, making his silhouette appear larger, taller, impossibly vast. His horns brushed the lower branches of the pines, knocking loose clumps of snow that fell like silent avalanches behind him. Back in the village, a child awoke suddenly. No sound had stirred him, no dream lingered, only a certainty, a cold, instinctive knowing that he was no longer alone. His eyes opened to darkness thicker than before. The room felt smaller, tighter, as if the walls had crept inward. His breath fogged in front of his face, though the fire downstairs still burned. Then he heard it, a slow drag of metal, not loud, not sudden, measured, intentional. The sound crept along the edge of his hearing, just enough to be undeniable. The boy pulled his blanket tighter, heart hammering. His eyes darted toward the door. The shadow beneath it moved. It stretched unnaturally long, splitting into jagged angles that did not belong to any human shape. A faint red glow pulsed once, twice, and vanished. Outside, Krampus tilted his head. The child's fear tasted fresh, sharp, honest. He moved on. Krampus did not rush. He never did. Fear ripened best when allowed to grow. He drifted from house to house like a living omen, pausing at windows, circling chimneys, letting his presence seep through wood and stone. Sometimes he scraped a horn against a roof tile, slow and deliberate. Sometimes he rattled his chains just once, never enough to wake the whole house, only enough to poison dreams. Children across the village began to stir. Some whimpered in their sleep. Some muttered apologies to no one. Some woke gasping, unable to remember what they had dreamed, only that something watched them in the dark. In one home, a girl sat upright in bed, frozen. Her eyes were locked at the corner of her room, where the darkness seemed deeper, thicker. The shadows there moved against the direction of the candlelight, folding inward like a wound. A smell reached her nose, cold air mixed with something older, damp fur, rusted iron. A bell jingled softly. Once, her heart nearly stopped. Krampus stood just beyond the wall, his form half-phased between worlds, horns casting impossible silhouettes that bent and warped across the plaster. His tongue slid slowly across his teeth, tasting her fear, her guilt, her silent prayers. He did not enter, not yet. The basket on his back shifted, the woven reeds creaking as though something inside adjusted itself, waiting. Hours crawled by. The village clock struck midnight, but the sound felt wrong, hollow, as if time itself had lost meaning. The wind picked up, forcing snow through the streets in spirals that erased footprints and blurred reality. The world felt distant now, muffled, like it existed beneath deep water. Krampus returned to the forest's edge once more. There, beneath the oldest pine, he paused. The ground here was dark, untouched by snow, as if the earth itself recoiled from him. He knelt slowly, chains clanking, and pressed a clawed hand into the soil. The forest responded with a low, groaning creak, roots shifting beneath the surface. He was not alone. From between the trees, shapes stirred, thin shadows, horned silhouettes, half-formed, born of folklore and fear. Lesser spirits, old watchers, remnants of ancient winters that recognized their master. They did not speak, they only waited. Krampus rose again. Tonight, some would be marked. He returned to the village with renewed purpose. In a small house near the square, a family slept unawares. The youngest child had been cruel, not in anger, but in pleasure. Krampus stopped above that roof. The snow melted beneath his hooves, hissing softly. His chains tightened. The bells rang twice. Inside, the child's eyes snapped open. This time, the shadow did not linger at the edge. It moved closer. The temperature dropped sharply. Frost crept across the inside of the window pane in branching patterns that resembled twisted horns. The door handle rattled once, then stopped. The child tried to scream. No sound came. Krampus leaned closer, his breath seeping through the cracks in the walls, carrying whispers of forgotten winters, of punishment older than mercy. The basket flexed again, the birch rods trembled, eager. And still he waited, because fear, at its peak, was always worth savoring. Outside, snow continued to fall. The village slept, the forest listened, and the longest part of the night had only just begun. The snow did not stop falling. It never did on nights like this. It thickened instead, pressing down on rooftops, bending branches, sealing the village inside a quiet so deep it felt intentional. Sound itself seemed afraid to move. Even the wind softened, as though the world were holding its breath. Krampus walked openly now. No longer content to remain half-seen, half-felt, he moved through the streets with his full weight upon them. His hooves struck the frozen ground in slow, deliberate rhythm. Crack, pause, crack, each step echoing through the bones of the sleeping village. Frost spread outward from his feet, creeping along stone and wood alike, leaving pale scars that would not thaw by morning. The chains dragged behind him, carving thin lines into the snow. This was the hour of choosing. In one small house near the edge of the village, a child lay awake, eyes wide and unblinking. He had been awake for a long time now, long enough to realize that sleep was no longer possible, long enough to understand that the shadows in his room no longer obeyed the candlelight. They leaned inward. The air grew sharp, biting. His breath came fast, shallow, visible. Then a sound from the roof. Not scratching. Wait. The ceiling creaked under something heavy shifting above it. Dust sifted down in fine trails. The child squeezed his eyes shut, whispering apologies to no one, promising to be good, promising anything. The chains rattled. Closer now. Krampus lowered himself from the roof with impossible grace. The chimney blackened as his horns passed near it, soot freezing in place. He landed without a sound, towering outside the child's window, his breath fogging the glass in slow, rhythmic pulses. One claw rose. The window did not shatter. It opened gently, as if inviting him in. Cold flooded the room instantly. The candle flame guttered and died. Darkness surged forward, thick and suffocating. Red eyes burned in the black, unblinking, patient. The child tried to move. His body refused. Krampus stepped inside. The floorboards froze beneath his hooves, splitting with soft, brittle cracks. His horns brushed the ceiling, leaving trails of frost. The smell of iron and old forests filled the room. The chains lifted on their own, wrapping loosely around his arms, whispering softly as they moved. He looked down at the child, not with anger, with certainty. The basket on his back shifted and opened slightly, darkness spilling from within like smoke. Shapes moved inside, suggestions of limbs, of faces, of something still breathing. Krampus reached out. The child was lifted from the bed without a sound. No scream followed, only silence. Outside, snow fell heavier, as if eager to hide what had happened. Across the village it began. Doors opened on their own, windows frosted white from the inside out. Shadows detached themselves from corners and crawled across walls. Children awoke unable to move, unable to cry out, their fear thickening the air like fog. Krampus moved from house to house. Sometimes he entered, sometimes he only marked. A claw dragged lightly across a doorframe, leaving a blackened scar that would never fade. A bell rang once above a roof, sealing a fate for another year. A chain brushed a window, etching frost in the shape of twisted horns. Those marked would remember, those taken would not return the same. The forest stirred. From the village edge, dark shapes emerged between the trees, gathering where the snow refused to fall. The basket grew heavier with each step Krampus took, its woven sides creaking under the weight of what it carried. Occasionally something inside shifted, pressing outward, then going still. Krampus reached the tree line just before dawn. The sky had begun to pale faintly, a weak, frightened gray. The forest opened for him, branches bending aside, roots pulling back. Deep within, paths twisted that no human could follow twice. He stepped into the trees. The village did not see him leave. By the time the sun rose, it rose on a place changed. Snow lay smooth and untouched. Chimneys smoked. Doors stood closed. Parents woke to quiet houses, to rooms that felt colder than they should. Some found their children pale and silent, eyes distant, refusing to speak of the night. Others found beds empty. No tracks led away. No signs of struggle remained. Only a faint smell of frost and iron and something ancient. The elders knew. They always did. That night no one spoke his name aloud, But they listened carefully to the forest, where something large moved deeper into the shadows, chains rattling softly, basket heavy, hunger satisfied for now. Because Krampus does not come once, he comes every winter, and next time he will take more. Morning came without warmth. The sun rose, pale and distant, casting a weak light over the village that felt borrowed, temporary, like something that could be taken away at any moment. Snow glittered softly, beautiful and untouched, as if the night had been peaceful. It had not been. Parents moved quietly through their homes, uneasy without knowing why. Floors creaked too loudly. Doors felt heavier to open. Rooms were colder than they should have been. In some houses, beds were empty. Blankets lay folded as if untouched. No signs of struggle, no footprints, just absence. In other homes, children sat upright in their beds, staring. They did not cry. They did not speak. Their eyes followed shadows that no longer existed. When asked what they had seen, they shook their heads slowly, as if refusing a thought that hurt too much to hold. But at night, when sleep finally claimed them, they screamed. They all screamed the same word. No one taught them that word. The elders gathered before noon. They met in the oldest house in the village, where the walls were thick and the beams dark with age. The fire burned low, refusing to grow no matter how much wood was added. Outside, the forest stood unnaturally still, its branches heavy, listening. They spoke quietly. They spoke of winters long past, of children taken and never returned, of marks burned into door frames, of bells heard where no bells hung. They spoke of Krampus. They said his name only once. The sound of it seemed to settle into the wood itself. The oldest among them remembered stories passed down in whispers, warnings, not myths. They said Krampus was not punishment alone, he was balance, a debt collector for sins left unpaid. And once he began to walk, he did not stop until the forest was satisfied. That night they tried to prepare. They barred doors. They lit candles. They prayed to saints they barely remembered believing in. Some hung symbols in their windows. Others left food outside, hoping to appease what could not be reasoned with. None of it mattered, because Krampus does not bargain. As darkness fell again, the wind returned, slow, deliberate, circling the village like a hunter testing a fence. Snow began to fall once more, heavier than before, swallowing sound, erasing distance. The bells rang, not from one place, from everywhere. Children woke at once. The forest answered. From the tree line came the sound of chains dragging over frozen roots, closer than they had ever been. Hooves struck stone. Shadows stretched long and thin beneath doors, moving against the light. Krampus returned. He did not approach cautiously this time. He walked openly through the village square, towering, unmistakable, horns scraping the night sky itself. Frost spread outward with each step, flowers of ice blooming across walls and windows. His eyes burned brighter than before, not hungry now, but focused. This was not a hunt. This was a reckoning. In one house, a child who had been spared the night before began to shake uncontrollably. His door creaked open by itself. Cold poured in like water. The chains rattled once, just once. The child understood. He was marked. Krampus passed him by. Not yet. In another home, a door frame blackened, curling inward as if scorched by invisible fire. A symbol appeared where the wood split, jagged, horned, unmistakable. The house had been chosen. The basket on Krampus's back shifted violently now. Inside, something moved, something that remembered being human. The forest pressed closer, trees bending inward, branches locking together behind him, sealing the village in. The wind carried whispers, apologies, regrets, prayers, all of them too late. Krampus stopped at the center of the square. He lifted his head, and for the first time, he roared. The sound was deep and vast, rolling across the village like thunder trapped beneath ice. Windows shattered outward, candles snuffed themselves out, hearts seized in chests. Every child, awake or asleep, felt it in their bones. This was not the end. This was the warning. As suddenly as it began, the sound stopped. Krampus turned back toward the forest. The chains followed. The bells rang softly, fading with distance. By morning, the village stood silent again. More beds were empty. More children stared without speaking, and carved deep into the great oak at the forest's edge was a single message, etched in claw marks no blade could have made. He will return before winter ends. The elders knew then. Krampus was not finished. He never was. Winter tightened its grip. Days passed, but they did not feel like days. The sun rose late and set early, casting long, fragile light that barely reached the forest's edge. Snow piled higher against doors and windows, pressing in as if the village were being slowly buried alive. No one laughed anymore. No one lingered outside, and every night, without fail, the bells were heard. Sometimes close, sometimes distant, sometimes ringing only in the mind. The children who had been marked began to change. At first it was subtle. They stopped dreaming. Parents noticed that their children slept with their eyes slightly open, pupils fixed on nothing, breath slow and shallow. When shaken awake, they stared as if returning from somewhere far away. They spoke less, ate less, and sometimes, when the wind blew just right, they whispered in a voice that was not entirely their own. They spoke of trees that bled frost, of paths that twisted endlessly downward, of a shadow with horns who waited patiently, never angry, never kind. At night, footprints appeared in the snow outside their windows, cloven, deep, perfectly spaced. By morning they vanished. The elders could no longer pretend. They gathered again, this time not by the fire, but in the cellar beneath the oldest house, where the stone walls were etched with symbols no one remembered carving. The air was thick with damp earth and fear. Candles flickered weakly, refusing to burn steady. They spoke of a ritual, an old one,
forbidden. A debt could be paid, they said. The forest could be satisfied, but the cost was not small and never chosen lightly. It required an offering, not of flesh alone, but of memory, guilt, and bloodline. Someone had to walk into the forest willingly. Someone marked. The silence that followed was unbearable. Above them, the wind moaned through the village like a grieving thing. That night, one of the marked children rose from his bed without waking his parents. His movements were slow, deliberate, guided. The door opened without a sound. Snow did not touch his feet. The forest welcomed him. From the trees, chains rattled softly. Krampus watched. He did not intervene. This was how it was meant to be. The child stepped deeper into the woods, guided by whispers only he could hear. The path twisted and lengthened, roots pulling back, branches bending aside. The deeper he went, the warmer the air became, not with comfort, but with the heat of something ancient waiting. At the heart of the forest stood a clearing untouched by snow. Krampus emerged from the darkness, towering, silent, eternal. The child did not scream. He knelt. The basket rested at Krampus's side now, heavier than ever, breathing slowly, like a thing asleep. The bells rang once. The chains fell still. The offering was accepted. Back in the village, the wind died. For the first time in weeks, the night passed without bells. Parents slept. Children breathed easier. Snow fell gently, harmlessly. But relief was thin, fragile, because in the forest, Krampus turned his burning eyes back toward the village. The debt had been paid, but not erased. It never was. He would return. He always did, and next time the offering would need to be greater. The forest remembered everything. So did Krampus. Winter did not loosen its grip. It hardened. The days grew dimmer, not shorter, weaker. The sun rose like a sickly eye behind clouds that never moved, casting light that felt cold and thin, as if it did not truly belong to the world anymore. Snow no longer sparkled. It dulled everything it touched, muting color, muffling sound, erasing distance. And the children kept disappearing. Not all at once, never all at once, one by one, like a slow counting. A boy failed to return from the well. A girl vanished between her bed and the door. Another was last seen standing at the forest's edge, unmoving, staring into the trees as if listening to someone calling her name. No footprints ever led away. No struggle was ever found. Only silence and the faint smell of frost and iron. The village began to fracture. Parents accused one another in whispers. Neighbors locked their doors and refused to open them even to friends. Prayers grew desperate, frantic, shouted into the cold night sky. Candles burned day and night, though they flickered constantly, as if something unseen passed near them again and again. Then, one morning, the sun rose fully, bright, clear, and Krampus was still there. He stood at the edge of the forest, fully visible, towering against the white expanse of snow. His black fur drank in the light without reflection. His horns curved skyward like ancient weapons. Chains hung motionless at his sides. His eyes burned, not red now, but a deep furnace orange that did not blink. No shadow hid him, no darkness softened him. The villagers froze where they stood. Children screamed, parents fell to their knees, some ran, some could not move at all. Krampus did not advance, he simply watched.
Daylight did not weaken him, it proved him. The forest behind him stirred, trees groaning, branches shifting as if waking from a long sleep. The air thickened, breath came harder. Every lie ever told in that village pressed into the chest like a weight. The bells rang, once, clear, final. Krampus lifted one claw and pointed, not at a house, not at a person, but at the village itself. This was no longer about children. This was about inheritance. That night the snow fell black, not dark, not gray, black. It swallowed the village whole, smothering sound, swallowing light. Doors burst open as if forced by unseen hands. The marked symbols burned hot against wood and stone. The forest surged forward, roots splitting roads, branches clawing at walls. Krampus walked through the center of it all. The basket was gone. He no longer needed it. Those who remained felt something tear loose inside them. Memories, guilt, generations of quiet cruelty pulled free and claimed by the forest. Some collapsed where they stood, hollow-eyed. Others followed him willingly into the trees, drawn by voices that sounded like forgiveness. By morning, the village was gone, not destroyed, erased. Snow covered where it had been, smooth and untouched. No ruins, no ash, no bodies. Only forest, stretching wide and silent, as if nothing human had ever existed there at all. Travelers would later pass near the place. They would feel uneasy. They would hear chains when no wind blew. They would see horned shadows at dusk. And sometimes in winter they would find small footprints leading into the woods, never away, because Krampus still walks, not once a year, not on a single night, but whenever the forest is owed. And somewhere, even now, a bell is ringing, softly, patiently, endless. Long after the village vanished, long after names were forgotten, long after maps were redrawn, the forest remained. Snow still fell there every winter, thick and quiet, blanketing the trees in white silence. Travelers avoided the place without knowing why. Their steps slowed, their breath caught. Their instincts warned them to turn back, though no danger could be seen. And yet, sometimes on the coldest nights, when the wind died suddenly and the world felt too still, a sound carried through the trees. A bell.
Not loud, not urgent, measured, patient. It rang once, then faded. Those who heard it felt a strange weight in their chest. Memories surfaced, small lies, forgotten cruelties, moments dismissed as harmless. The bell did not accuse, it reminded. Deep in the forest, where the snow never settled and the earth remained dark and warm, Krampus walked. He no longer hurried, he no longer hunted, he waited. Chains hung loosely at his sides, silent until needed. His horns bore scars from centuries of winters. His eyes burned softly now, not with hunger, but with knowing. Every step he took pressed memory into the ground. Every breath fed the forest that had bound itself to him. The children he took were not gone, they were remembered. Their whispers moved through the trees, through the roots, through the frozen soil beneath the snow. Sometimes they spoke in the wind. Sometimes they breathed in the frost on windows far away. Sometimes they rang the bell. Krampus stopped at the forest's edge and looked out over the world beyond. New villages stood there now, new houses, new children, new sins. He did not cross the boundary, not yet. Winter always returned, and when it did, the snow would fall a little heavier. The nights would grow a little longer. Shadows would stretch just a little too far. Somewhere a child would lie awake, feeling watched. Somewhere chains would stir. Somewhere a bell would ring, and the story would begin again. Nox Hour, loop outro for ambient horror ending. Let your eyes close, let the night stretch. The snow is falling again. The forest is listening. There is no beginning here. There is no end. Only footsteps in the dark. Only chains in the distance. Only a bell ringing softly, patiently, endlessly. And if you think you heard it just now, don't worry. It wasn't for you. Not yet. Welcome to Nox Hour, where the night never truly ends.